Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
Rav Naruto.
Naruto-kun.
Hinata shouted. I looked back at her. She was running towards me with tear-stained eyes. I felt warmth spreading in my chest, and it became harder to breathe. Was that blood? Was I dying? And indeed, I was dying. There was a rod lodged in my chest. With a sharp movement, I pulled it out, but it was too late. My consciousness was slowly but surely fading. Unable to stand on my own 2 feet any longer, I fell. Don't die, Hinata cried bitterly. Sakura will come and heal you now. And suddenly I understood. I love you, Hinata, I said in a hoarse voice. Goodbye, Naruto ending row. Hinata was momentarily taken aback by this. She'd always wanted Naruto to love her, of course, but not at this price. It would have been better if her love had remained unrequited forever. It would have been better if she had died instead of him, but she didn't have time. She never had time for anything. Don't cry, Hinata. I'm not worth anyone's tears, Naruto said, pausing for a moment. Especially yours. After all, only towards the end of my life did I realize that I love you. Don't say that, Naruto-kun. It's not over yet, Hinata said, taking Naruto's hand. Goodbye, Naruto said with some bitterness. His eyes closed never to wake. His lips closed never to smile. His heart stopped never to feel again. Dead. Sakura delivered her verdict, having managed to run up to Naruto during this time. No, not that, Hinata said quietly, her voice hoarse from tears. She silently thought to herself that she would be strong for Naruto-kun. The heart of your alliance, as well as its brain, is dead, said a triumphant Madara. Admit that you have lost. For a time there was complete silence. Suddenly Hinata spoke up. We can't give up or Naruto-kun's sacrifice will be in vain. And I can't let that happen, even at the cost of my own life, he said with a courage that surprised everyone who knew Hinata. A moment later, the entire alliance supported her. When Naruto awoke, he saw a dark space with a fire burning in the center. A woman sat on a log near the fire. She was slender, fair-skinned, with violet blue eyes and bright red hair that reached her ankles, with strands framing her face on either side. She wore a loose-fitting dress with a sleeveless blouse and a high-necked collar. The blouse was white, while the dress was light green. She also wore a dark blue ribbon on her left wrist and lavender sandals. As was the custom with shinobi, she was Kushina, Naruto's mother. Mom! Naruto shouted joyfully, standing up and walking towards the woman. Naruto? Kushina cried out in surprise, but went to hug her son anyway. The hug did not last long. Kushina suddenly pulled back and, with some anger mixed with resentment, asked, How dare you? Dare what? Naruto asked in surprise, raising his eyebrows slightly. He dared to die, Kushina said, sad that her son's life had ended before it had even begun. Naruto, not expecting such an answer, decided to remain silent. Okay, let's go sit down, said Kushina. There is no truth in the legs. Where is father? He's gone, Kushina replied. I think they used Edo Tensei, the resurrection technique, on him. And when will he return? When the one who used the technique stops its effects, or when they are sealed, Kushina said crisply. Tell me why you died. We've started the 4th Shinobi World War, Naruto said with a frown, thinking to himself, how many people died in this war? With whom is the war? With Madara and the other resurrected ones, with the 10-tailed one and the masked man. The 10 tails? Kushina asked, puzzled. I read a book about shinobi legends before, and there was something about the 10 tails, but is it really true? Yes, Naruto answered. The criminal organization Akatsuki captured the Jinchuriki of the tailed beasts and extracted the bijou from them. So they pulled the 9 tails out of you and you died? No, Mom, you misunderstood me. Naruto answered a little timidly. Oh, right, you were able to get along with the 9 tails? Actually, his name is Kurama, and he is my friend, Naruto answered heatedly. I'm so glad. Minato and I were hoping you'd find common ground with him, and you did. How do you say he died? Kushina changed the subject. They pierced me with a rod, he added after a little thought. In the heart. Strange, very strange, strange, Naruto asked, raising his eyebrows slightly. Don't people die from wounds like that? Ordinary people may die, but you are at least half an Uzumaki. Seeing that this meant nothing to her son, she continued. I remember when I was still living in Yuzushio, they brought a Uzumaki boy to our hospital. He had several wounds to his vital organs. And what do you think? A slight pause, creating suspense. He survived. That means you couldn't have died, too. I'm sure there's something fishy going on here. Why did you decide that there was something fishy here? I have a premonition, Kushina said in a voice as if any fool could understand it. And in general, I just know. Of course, I'm not hinting at anything, but what did you say? Kushina said furiously, getting up from the log. Her hair began to resemble the tails of a nine-tailed fox, and her eyes became red like a demon's. Naruto agreed once again that mothers can be scary. And how did Dad live with her? She'd even drive the dead to their graves. No wonder they called her the bloody habanero. So what did you say? Kushina repeated the question. I'm telling you that you have such beautiful hair, Naruto said to himself, thinking, what if it works? Kushina immediately changed. Her hair no longer resembled the tails of a nine-tailed fox, and her eyes returned to their usual appearance. She sat down in the place where she had been sitting before and asked, Is it true? Having received an affirmative nod in response, Kushina remained satisfied. How old are you now? Asked Kurama's second Jinchuriki. 16. Only 16? Said a depressed Kushina and thought. Even I died when I was 21. Kushina was saddened that her beloved son had died so early. After all, he probably couldn't fulfill his dream of becoming Hokage. After all, she'd always hoped Naruto would show up here as late as possible. He couldn't just die like that, could he? Suddenly, Naruto's body began to glow with a bluish light. Kushina looked at him hopefully, and when he began to dissolve, the red-haired girl hugged Naruto and said with an, I told you so look, Naruto, I'll be expecting you here in at least 100 years. Good luck. And remember that I love you. I love you too, Mom, Naruto said a second before completely dissolving. Kushina looked a little longer at the place where her son had recently been sitting, smiled, but instantly became serious as if she had seen something she never wanted to see. She stood up and walked off, deliberately slowly. Uzumaki seemed to be walking calmly until she heard a scream. This awakening wasn't as pleasant for Naruto as the last, not least because every bone in his body ached. Opening his eyes, Naruto saw black ears, as he mentally dubbed the Catman, and a girl whose costume resembled a ladybug. How are you feeling? The girl asked. Your clothes are all covered in blood. It's fine, Naruto said, and, to confirm his words, stood up on his feet. It's good that my lady and I managed to catch you, the guy in the cat costume said proudly. Don't get cocky, kitty. Lady tried to calm her partner. Are you sure you don't need help? The girl asked Naruto. Yes, everything is fine with me. Cat's ring and lady's earrings began to flash. Okay then, let's go, said the guy. Otherwise, we'll soon be reincarnated. When his partners left, Naruto closed his eyes and called out to Kurama. If you call me, nothing will come of it. The fox's voice was heard. Naruto's eyes widened and he asked, Kurama, where are you? I'll show myself to you only if you promise not to laugh. I promise I won't laugh. A small nine-tailed creature, smaller than a fist, flew out, and its expression was more serious than ever. Naruto could barely contain his laughter. The expression on his face and the size of his body together were too comical. But Uzumaki quickly pulled himself together and asked, What's happened? And you still don't get it? Doesn't it bother you that you weren't even surprised when you saw these two? I never really thought about it, Naruto answered, throwing his hand behind his head. You're a fool. That's why you didn't think about it. We're in a different world, after all. And here I don't sense anyone's chakra except maybe those two and natural chakra. Why wasn't I surprised when I saw this couple? Let's say we received superficial knowledge of this world as a gift. Now I understand why I thought they were superheroes. But I don't understand why you're so small and why you fly. I'm some kind of Kwami, and you need to say magic words to use my power. What are these magic words? Yeah, right, that's what I told you. Please, Naruto began to beg. Just tell me. Okay then. You need to say Kurama merge. Kurama, we merge. Naruto wore an orange superhero suit, 9 tails on his back and a mask with fox ears on top. Looking at himself, Naruto said, "What's this? The power of youth with the thick-browed man and his sensei, only in a different color?"
Grosh.
As Naruto continued jumping from one building to another, he heard a voice in his head. "Naruto, if you don't want to spend the night on a bench like a homeless person, then take the trouble to find yourself a job and get some paperwork." Kurama said discontentedly, "How can I get you documents if I have no money? And no documents, no work. Fool, what do you need shadow clones for? Just make a clone and force it to turn into these pieces of paper. Then you'll have documents, albeit temporary ones." "Okay, where should I work then?" "You can go to a martial arts school. There's one nearby." "Are you talking about the 1-2 blocks from here?"
Yeah.
"And stop attracting attention. Otherwise, they'll think you're the new supervillain." "Okay, now I'll just find a place where I can transform," Naruto said, looking around for a place where there were no people. "It's too late," said Kurama. Naruto sensed someone else's chakra behind him, turned around, and saw Ladybug and Cat Noir. The latter were about to attack, but Naruto said, "Guys, I'm not an enemy," he said, smiling and waving his arms vigorously. "Clever, Hawk Moth, but we won't fall for that," the girl replied. "But I'm not really an enemy," Naruto said, defending himself from Koda's attack. "You have no evidence," the brunette replied. "There is proof," Uzumaki said, dodging Ladybug's blow. "I wanted to resolve everything peacefully." "Don't you dare," Kurama shouted, realizing that his clueless Jinchuriki was trying to transform. "Why is that?" Naruto asked mentally, seeing that his partners weren't going to listen to him. "You should be the first to find out who they are, and not the other way around." "And what do you suggest I do?" "There are 2 options here. Either you beat them half to death or you retreat. But it's better to retreat." "Is there a 3rd option?" "Eat. And what kind?" "You're going to turn yourself in to the police, and they'll throw you in jail. But don't worry, they'll feed you, water you, and put you to bed. It's all included." "Okay, I get it. But why retreat? Do you want to gain their trust in this form?" "Got it, I'm taking action." "Super chance," Ladybug shouted. But nothing appeared. Nothing at all. While his partners were confused, Naruto jumped off the building into a deserted alley and transformed. A moment later, the partners came down the same alley, and seeing the blonde, Ladybug approached him and asked, "Excuse me, have you seen anyone here?" "No," answered Naruto, who had managed to take off his bloody jacket. "Thank you," said the girl and ran off with the cat to look for the villain. Naruto sighed with relief and thought, "What kind of people are the Parisians?" Using the transformation jutsu, Uzumaki changed his clothes slightly and made fake documents. "And looking around, I went to the taijutsu school, or as they call it here, the martial arts school." Approaching the entrance and not seeing any security, Naruto entered the building with a calm soul. Upon entering, he saw a red-haired boy with blue eyes. He looked about the same age as Naruto. He was dressed in black sweatpants and a black t-shirt with the red inscription, "I love sport." Naruto approached him and said, "Sorry to bother you, but you don't know who's in charge here." "Are you talking about our director?" the red-haired man asked, smiling brightly. Without thinking twice, Naruto nodded. "Then you need to go up to the 2nd floor, turn left, and you'll see our director's office," the red-haired man said, gesturing vigorously with his hands. "Thank you. By the way, my name is Naruto Uzumaki." The blonde introduced himself, extending his hand for a handshake. "Eric Curie," the red-haired man replied, repeating Naruto's gesture. After exchanging a few words with his new acquaintance, Uzumaki went to the director. Approaching the office, Naruto knocked on the door and, hearing a quiet, "Come in," went inside. Upon entering, the blonde man saw a man of about 50 standing before him. He had sharp features and short, gray hair. He was dressed in a casual business suit. "Hello, Monsieur Bonnier," Naruto said with all the politeness he could muster. As Kurama used to say, "Politeness is everything in Paris." "Hello?" the director answered, putting his pen on the table and looking at Naruto. "What's your question?" "I would like to work for you as a trainer. Show me the documents." Naruto handed Bonya the fake documents. After quickly glancing at them, the director turned his gaze to Uzumaki. "Are you laughing at me, boy?" Bonnier stated more than asked. "You're only 16. Arkady Gaidar became a company commander at 16. And Naruto Uzumaki will become a martial arts coach. You're a confident guy. I was the same way when I was a kid," Bonnier said, smiling as if remembering something good. "Okay, you'll get the job, but only if you beat our best coach, or at least last 5 minutes against him." "It will be done," Naruto said, smiling broadly. Uzumaki had no doubt that he would win, but he was wrong. Approaching the hall, Naruto confidently pulled the door handle and entered. Looking around, Uzumaki stopped his gaze on the apparently trainer and froze, not believing his eyes. "Mom," Naruto whispered quietly. Sitting on a log near the fire, Kushina looked at the spot where her son had been sitting a second ago. Suddenly, she felt a strong surge of chakra. "It's strange. I've never felt someone else's chakra here. Even in life, I've never felt such strong chakra." Kushina rose from the log and walked toward the source of the chakra. As she approached, Uzumaki made out a female silhouette. Kushina quickened her pace and came very close and saw that the woman was holding a struggling man in one hand and a dagger in the other. The woman looked Kushina straight in the eyes and ended the unfortunate man's life. The woman had long white hair, violet eyes, bright red lips, and horns on her head. She wore a high-collared kimono with tomo on the sleeves and center, as well as gold and purple line decorations. Touching the forehead of the numb Kushina, the woman said, "Obey." Kushina felt as if thousands of needles were piercing every cell of her body. The pain was unbearable. Kushina screamed, although the pain lasted only a few seconds. For Kushina, they felt like an eternity. "Who are you and what do you need?" "I am Kaguya, the progenitor of chakra, and I need you to keep your son from leaving the world I threw him into." "But why do you need this?" "Last time I underestimated my sons, and they defeated me. This time, I will not repeat my mistake and will emerge victorious from this battle. I won't keep my son there. And why me, anyway?" "Because he trusts you." "What is this technique you used on me?" "This is a very chakra-intensive technique. Even for me, it only works on the dead. It subjugates any soul and brings it back to life with a specific purpose. In your case, as I already told you, it's to prevent your son from returning to his world at any cost. And I almost forgot. Through you, I can observe everything and more. Why are you telling me this?" "You will forget about our conversation, remembering only the goal." "When?" "Right now," Kaguya replied, grinning. "This time I'll succeed and someone will help me with it," she thought, smiling madly. "Mother?" Boni looked at Naruto as if he was mentally ill and asked worriedly, "Hey man, are you okay? You're an orphan. Do you need an ambulance?" "What? Did I say mom?" "Well, I meant my mom's sister." "Uh-huh," Uzumaki replied, not knowing what to do with his hands. "Are you talking about Kushina Namikaze?" Naruto nodded affirmatively. Meanwhile, Kushina, noticing the invaders, began to advance towards them. Having reached her destination, Kushina smiled and said, "Hello, Monsieur Bonnier." "Hello, Naruto." "Kushina, how many times do I have to ask you to just call me Basil?" "Forgive me, Monsieur Bonnier," she said, showing with all her appearance that she was not going to call him simply Basil. Bonnier sighed resignedly and said, "Kushina, could you fight this guy?" "Of course I can." "Well then, let's get started," Naruto said optimistically, hitting his fist against his palm. Bonnier went to sit down on a bench, anticipating the spectacle, or rather the spectacular defeat of the young Uzumaki. And Kushina and Naruto came out to the center of the hall. "Children, teenagers, and just ordinary people," the red-haired girl shouted, waiting for everyone's attention to be focused on her. And when it happened, and it happened very quickly, Kushina continued, "Rejoice, you idiots. Today your heads will remain intact. There will be no new bruises on your arms, and no one will be taken away by ambulance." "But I would doubt it about him," the red-haired woman said, pointing towards Naruto. Quickly realizing what their teacher meant, the students followed Bonnier's example. When everyone was seated, Kushina asked, "Ready for training?" "Ready," Naruto replied, getting into a fighting stance. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, leaping forward, Closing the distance, Kushina and Naruto attempted a frontal attack. But quickly realizing it was pointless, they changed tactics. The redhead launched a kick to the jaw, but Naruto, quick to react, managed to intercept Kushina's leg, and she, in turn, dropped to the floor on her palms. Unfazed, the redhead kicked off the floor and struck Naruto in the jaw with her free leg. Now free, Kushina appeared behind Naruto like lightning, and just as her hand was about to reach his carotid artery, Naruto ducked in time to deliver a spinning kick to the unwary Kushina. The girl lowered her face so that her eyes could not be seen. After standing like that for a few seconds, the red-haired girl finally raised her cold gaze to Naruto. Looking the blonde straight in the eyes, Kushina began to deliver quick blows to the stomach in the style of Hugo. Naruto, not expecting this, saw a thin stream of blood flow from his mouth, which he quickly wiped away with the back of his hand. Quickly pulling himself together, Naruto moved behind Kushina at the speed of light and twisted her right arm. A loud crunching sound was heard. The red-haired woman, with a nagging pain in her arm, tried to throw a left hook, but Naruto managed to dodge in time. And, "Your time's up," Bonnier said, smiling happily, running up and showing his stopwatch, which showed exactly 5 minutes. "I watched your fight closely and I've decided you're accepted," the director continued, shining like a polished coin. The students were also happy, at least because, as Kushina put it, the ambulance won't take anyone away. Only the red-haired one didn't look pleased. But why? It's a mystery to everyone. Kaguya, appearing in a dimension known only to her, approached the cliff, raised her hands to the sun and said, "Child of the sun, appear to me, Otsutsuki Kaguya." A moment later, a woman began to descend directly from the sun. She was beautiful. She had light brown eyes, slightly tanned skin, and golden curls that reached her waist. She was dressed in a red, full-length kimono. "Why did you call me Kaguya?" the stranger asked. "I want to make a deal with you, Teo." Walking down the street next to Kushina, who insisted that they lived together, arguing that she was still his mother, Naruto, burning with curiosity, asked, "Mom, how did you end up here?" "Postpone the questions for later," Kushina answered with a sweet smile. Naruto fell silent and decided to find out everything at home. Literally a few minutes later, the red-haired and blonde-haired girl reached a multi-story building. Another minute later, they were in a 2-room apartment. "It's as if she knew that I would appear here," Naruto thought, but quickly dismissed these thoughts and decided that it was just a coincidence. Kushina went to the kitchen. The Jinchuriki followed her example. The red-haired girl brewed green tea with lemon balm and placed a plate of cookies in the center of the table where Naruto was sitting. Having wished each other bon appetit, mother and son began their meal. "So, how did you get here?" Naruto asked, looking sadly at his empty plate. Closing her eyes as if remembering something, Kushina answered, "When you disappeared, a black hole appeared behind you. I came closer to it and it sucked me in." "And when did you appear here?" "A little over a month ago. Or, to be more precise, 32 days ago." "But how did this happen?" Naruto asked, surprised by such a statement. "I don't know," Kushina answered, lowering her head onto her hand. "But I know you need to go to school," the girl continued, smiling. "But why?" "I'll get out of here soon and help my friends," Naruto declared, more confident than ever. "There's no way out of here," said Kushina, who seemed to be starting to get angry. "Then I'll be the first to find a way out," Naruto replied, stunned. Kushina, who was completely angered by this speech, moved to Naruto in a split second. The blonde immediately turned and looked into the red-haired girl's eyes. But they weren't her eyes. The Rinnegan was burning in those eyes. "Naruto, you know there's no way out of here." Naruto's eyes immediately became Rinnegan. "Yes," the blonde answered. "You will stay here with your loving mother forever, right?" "Yes," Naruto answered, coming to his senses. Having finally come to his senses, the blonde looked into Kushina's eyes, in which the Rinnegan no longer burned, and asked, "What happened to me? What do you remember?" "We talked and then everything was like a dream. Everything went according to plan," Kushina thought to herself and said out loud, smiling. "Then you lost consciousness, Naruto. It's clear. Come on, I'll show you your room." "Yeah." After showing Naruto his room, Kushina left and the blonde was left alone. Well, almost alone. Kurama. A small cat o' 9 tails flew out of the pouch. What do you want? Why did I lose consciousness? I don't know, I fell asleep. Sometimes I get the feeling you're not a fox, but a marmot. As they say, a sheep in wolf's clothing. And why is that? And not a sheep in wolf's clothing, but a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because you sleep all the time. It's just that foxes are nocturnal animals, Mr. Deneau. Who else is here I don't know. You're Deneau here. And anyway, I've been demanding respect for 2,000 years now. I can tell by looking at you, Naruto replied, laughing. I'm glad we found a common language, Kurama quipped. Likewise, this time they both laughed. You seem to say something about consciousness. Yes, exactly. Basically, I have a strange feeling, like something important has been ripped out of me. Seeing the confusion in Kurama's eyes, Naruto continued. It may sound strange, but it's true. I believe you, even though it sounds like nonsense. Naruto, we're going shopping for some proper clothes, Kushina shouted from the next room. Naruto sighed resignedly, realizing that this would take a long time, and left the room. Ladybug jumped onto the balcony of her house and, making sure no one was looking at her, transformed into an ordinary girl named Marinette. Tiki, hide. The brunette whispered quietly, hearing footsteps. Tiki quickly flew into the girl's purse. The door to the balcony opened and Marinette saw her dad. Marinette, I finally found you. I've been looking for you all over the house. Really? And I was just looking at Paris and listening to music. Ha, Marinette said, smiling falsely and hiding her hands behind her back. I see. Will you help me in the bakery? Yes, of course. Having gone down to the first floor and put on an apron, the girl began to work. A few hours later, a tired Marinette was already lying on her bed, looking through missed messages on her phone. Marinette, Tiki called to her mistress. What? Remember that guy you and Kot fought today? Of course I remember, because we couldn't even find him. Marinette, he could hurt someone. And, Marinette, listen to me. The Kwami shouted as loudly as she could.
I'm sorry, Tiki.
I'm listening to you. This guy is not our enemy. But why? Trix saw it once. Or rather, the one who is inside it. Tell me more. The Kwami has a secret, and we swore not to tell it without a good reason. But now a good reason has appeared. I'm all ears, Marinette said, not expecting anything special. Once upon a time, thousands of years ago, we were much larger and stronger. People summoned us and made contracts with us to help them in battle. For example, Sass was Orochimaru's first summoned snake. What about Trix? One day, a 9-tailed fox demon came to the fox camp where he once lived, Trix. At that time, they began sealing him into people, and he decided to take a little break from fighting people, so to speak. The 9-tailed fox was very powerful and never obeyed humans. But why then do you say that the guy's not an enemy? So, does that mean the 9 tails was sealed inside this guy? Yes, the 9 tails was sealed in him. I told you that the 9-tailed fox doesn't obey people, which means that either this guy found a common language with it, or he's an Uchiha. What is Uchiha? This is a clan with a special gene. But the guy can't be an Uchiha because he didn't have the Sharingan in his eyes. And even if he wanted to, he would have killed us long ago. Is he that strong? It's better to be his ally than his enemy. Wait, if Trix lived in the land of foxes, then you lived in the land of ladybugs? Yes. Cool. Where did that country go? You didn't understand me, Marinette. The girl's face showed bewilderment. We are just like that guy from another world, Tiki continued. But how did you get here? I don't know about him, and we were killed because those who signed the contract with us killed us. No matter what age you are, the first day at a new school is always exciting, and that's exactly the kind of day Naruto had. Young Uzumaki walked with Kushina to a new school, not even suspecting what awaited him there. As they entered the school, the students glanced at them, some with interest, some with indifference, and some with outright surprise. Carefully ignoring these stares, Kushina and Naruto reached the principal's office. Knocking on the door and hearing a quiet "enter," the shinobi entered. A man sat at the desk. He had large, thick black eyebrows, gray sideburns and a beard, and a white mustache. The director's eyes were amber, and his nose was straight. The man was wearing a brown suit, shoes of the same color, and a tie that was slightly lighter than the suit. "Hello, Monsieur Damocles," Kushina greeted. "Hello," the director answered. "Is this the guy you were talking about?" "Yes." Damocles wordlessly extended his hand as if demanding something, and Kushina quickly understood him and handed over the fake documents, which, as she put it, were made by a master of his craft. Having carefully examined the documents, the director asked, "Why did you transfer here from an elite Japanese school?" "Due to family circumstances," Kushina answered, making it clear that she wasn't going to tell anything big. Having given his consent for Uzumaki to study at this school, the director told Naruto, who had been standing like furniture all this time, to follow him while Kushina, citing work, went off somewhere. Naruto followed Damocles through the empty corridors, and after a few minutes they reached the physics class. Damocles entered the office without knocking and gestured for Naruto to follow him. Upon entering, Uzumaki saw a girl of about 25 with large blue eyes, blonde hair falling in waves almost to her waist, very white, even teeth, and a light gait. It was the physics teacher, Fleur Delacour. "Sorry to interrupt your lesson, but I want to inform you that from today on, there will be a new student studying with you. Introduce yourself." "Hello, everyone. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I'm from Japan. I'd be glad to meet you." There was a murmur of approval in response. "I wish you good luck, Naruto," Damocles said and left the office. "Naruto, do you have any textbooks?" Fleur asked.
No.
"Then sit at the last desk with Lila Rossi." Naruto silently followed to the designated seat, where a girl of average height with tan skin and olive green eyes sat. She had long brown hair with straight bangs, tied with an orange hair tie, and 2 short strands on the sides of her face, also tied with hair ties. She wears a coral leather jacket over a dark gray V-neck romper with small white dots, light gray pants, and brown boots. She placed the textbook on the center of the table and smiled artificially. Naruto took a notebook and pen out of his briefcase and began quickly writing down what the teacher said. Nothing remarkable happened in class, except that Naruto realized that he didn't understand stupid physics at all. Walking home along the now familiar street, Naruto turned his head, trying to absorb as much information as possible. Looking into the alley, Uzumaki saw a familiar red-haired head. Naruto walked towards him. "Hello, Eric." When Kuri turned around, Naruto saw that Eric's hands were covered in blood, someone else's blood. At Kuri's feet lay the corpse of a man in his 20s, his stomach ripped open. Eric himself was grinning madly, tucking the bloody knife into his backpack. "But why?" Naruto asked worriedly. "Why? I've been training, because soon I'll become one of the Raven's Eyes," Eric replied fanatically, and after a moment's thought, added, "Would you like to join us? We could use your strength." Naruto's pupils dilated. "What power?" Uzumaki asked, trying to look unperturbed. "Don't play dumb, Naruto. I know everything. But from where?" "It's a secret," Eric answered with a grin. "But what are the goals of your organization?" "Good." The sound of a police siren was heard. "Think about this proposal," said Kuri and disappeared around the corner of the nearest building. Without thinking twice, Naruto ran from the crime scene. Chapter 6. The Arrest of Gabriel Agresti. A girl of about 17 was walking down one of Paris's many streets. She had eyes the color of a sea breeze, a sharp, doll-like nose, and long, dark, almost black hair. The girl wore a simple dark blue dress that fell just above the knees and carried a black backpack. Her name was Rebecca Sorrel. Rebecca began to approach the house cautiously. She looked out the window and, making sure that there was no one in the house, took an iron paperclip out of her backpack, bent it at an angle known only to her, and Sorrel stuck the paperclip into the keyhole. And just a minute later, the lock clicked. Rebecca, smiling with satisfaction, entered the house. Walking down the hallway, she found herself in a spacious room with a chest of drawers and a gramophone on it. Approaching the chest of drawers, Sorrel pressed the buttons on the gramophone in a specific order and watched as a jewelry box appeared. Taking it, she headed for the exit. A week had already passed since Naruto's stay in the other world. The Jinchuriki went to school and work, noticing certain oddities about his mother. but he'd never known her. Maybe she'd always been like this? It was probably normal for her to lock herself in her dark room for long periods, staring at the empty, desert-like ceiling. Although, even in the desert, there's something to see. Kushina seemed completely different in the other world. Perhaps it was just his imagination. First impressions are deceiving, right? Naruto was also uneasy about Eric's proposal. It was unlikely that an organization with noble intentions would kill passersby. Or perhaps this man was a drug dealer or the head of the local mafia. Unlikely, but that's not the point now. Everything was quiet, almost too quiet. It was the calm before the storm. The only question was how big the storm would be. Naruto found out the answer to this question today. Everything was as usual. Uzumaki was walking home from school, but suddenly he heard the sounds of explosions. Running to the scene, the blonde saw Hawkmoth and his assistant fighting 3 unknown individuals dressed as superheroes. One was a dark-haired guy in a dragon costume, another was a dead ringer for the first in a snake costume, and the third was a red-haired girl in a fox costume. Looking at the passersby, Naruto saw zombie-like figures who were clearly not on the trio's side. Realizing what was going on, Uzumaki ran behind the nearest cafe and transformed. The Jinchuriki ran onto the battlefield, created a Rasengan, and destroyed one of the zombies. Weaker than a newly graduated genin. He might only bite, Naruto thought. After weighing the pros and cons, Uzumaki decided to help defeat Hawkmoth and his partner. Sitting in the lotus position, Naruto began to gather natural chakra. A minute later, a cross-shaped pattern appeared in the Jinchuriki's eyes. Uzumaki ran straight at Hawkmoth, noticing the source of the natural chakra. Engaging the man in taijutsu, Naruto managed to rip off the brooch, which somewhat resembled a butterfly. As soon as he did, an ordinary man stood in the place of the terrifying Hawkmoth. The man had slicked-back blonde hair and dark blue eyes. He was wearing a white jacket, red trousers, and a red and white striped tie. The blonde man turned around and shouted to his partner, "Run!" Not daring to disobey the man, the woman began to run away. Naruto wanted to run after her, but the blonde-haired man grabbed his hand. "Please don't touch her. She's doing this because of me," the former Hawkmoth asked. Naruto looked into eyes full of hope. "I swear she won't hurt anyone," the man continued. After thinking for a bit, Naruto said, "Okay, but if you become a threat to Paris again, I will kill you without a second thought." The man nodded, turned around and walked down the streets of Paris. A trio of snake, dragon, and fox, as he called them to himself, approached Uzumaki. "Give us Hawkmoth's talisman," the dragon said in a commanding tone. "Why would that be?" Naruto asked mockingly. "By the way, what's your answer to Eric's proposal?" Fox changed the subject. Uzumaki hesitated a little and smiled slightly before answering. "My answer is no." "So you won't give us the talisman either?" asked the serpent. Naruto just shook his head. "Well, if you don't want it the easy way, it will be the bad way," the snake said with a threat in his voice. But suddenly the talismans of all 3 began to blink, warning the owners that they would soon be reincarnated. "You're lucky," said the dragon, disappearing into the alley with the others. Looking around, Naruto saw Ladybug and Cat Noir. "You need this more," Uzumaki said, handing over Hawkmoth's talisman. "But where from?" Ladybug asked, raising her head from the talisman to the place where Naruto had stood a second ago. Naruto walked across an empty field, sparsely lit by a single enormous white tree. It seemed as if there wasn't a soul in the field, only the cold corpses of the dead. But circling the tree clockwise, Uzumaki spotted Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and an unfamiliar man whose face was covered in numerous scars. They were fighting 2 women, one of whom had pale skin, very long, snow-white hair, a horn on her head, and a Byakugan glowing in her eyes. She was wearing a white, floor-length kimono adorned with 6 tomo. The other woman was slightly tanned, had curly golden hair, and her brown eyes had a pattern somewhat reminiscent of rose thorns. She wore a red, floor-length kimono, the color of a setting sun. Naruto ran to the battle site and shouted, "Sasuke!" But there was no reaction. Then Uzumaki ran past Uchiha and even exposed himself to one of the white-haired girl's techniques. But nothing happened. It was as if he had become a ghost. Wait, a ghost? Naruto looked at his hands and discovered that they were translucent. Suddenly, the Jinchuriki felt a tap on his shoulder. Naruto turned around and saw a tall man with waist-length blonde hair, pupilless eyes, and horns on his forehead, wielding the legendary Dojutsu Byakugan. He also had no eyebrows. A strand of hair hung down the right side of his face. He wore a light-colored, high-collared kimono with 6 magatama depicted on the chest, and dark pants. "Who are you?" Uzumaki asked in surprise. "I am Hamura Otsutsuki, brother of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, or as you call him, the Sage of the Six Paths. AAA, I know you have a lot of questions, but we don't have much time, so leave them for later." Naruto nodded his head. "So, my brother shared his power with your friend, and that's why he would have been able to defeat that white-haired woman, but a big problem named Teo stood in our way. Sasuke can't handle those two, so you'll be helping him. But it's impossible to escape from the world I find myself in. I see someone has put a seal of suggestion on you." Hamura made a few hand seals, placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, and said, "Removal." Here Naruto seemed to wake up from a terrible dream. "So, you say it's possible to get back to your world?" Uzumaki asked. "I haven't said it yet, but there's an ancient technique that allows you to travel between worlds. But if you use this technique without the Rinnegan, at best you'll die after a while, and at worst, well, I'll pass on my knowledge and power to you, and you'll figure it out yourself. I'm certainly no sage of the Six Paths, but I can do a few things, too." Hamura concentrated and placed his palm on Naruto's palm. It was 5 in the morning. Naruto jumped out of bed and immediately looked at his palm. There was a crescent-shaped marking on it. "I think I'm in trouble," Uzumaki thought cheerfully, because he always loved adventures. Naruto sat down in a meditative pose to study that very ancient movement technique, after using which he would, at best, die. In a word, fun. After 2 hours of meditation, Naruto went to school. Time moves slower in this world, so we can stay here for a few more days and help the Parisians with this Raven's Eye, Naruto thought. While in the clouds during class, Uzumaki realized that this was the beginning of the end. In the organization, Eric Curie sat in a comfortable black chair and reflected on his childhood. Flashback: Eric's family, consisting of a businessman father, a seamstress mother, and a little sister named Avellini, were getting ready to go to the countryside to their dacha. Eric's father he was quite tall. He had blue eyes, a straight nose, short blonde hair, and wrinkles across the bridge of his nose, indicating a serious personality. Eric's father liked to wear a business suit, which he sometimes even wore at home, but now he was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and black pants. Eric believed his mother was the complete opposite of his father. She was slender, with loving eyes the color of tranquil meadows, fiery red hair that curled slightly to her waist, and an upturned, freckled nose. She wore a loose-fitting black dress that fell just above the knees, and a small, handy handbag was slung over her shoulder. Eric himself considered his sister an angel incarnate. Avellini had serene blue eyes that sparkled with joy and mischief, medium-length blonde locks, and a straight nose without a single freckle. She was wearing a sky-blue dress. When the packing was done, the Curies got into the car and headed to the dacha. On the way, as usual, they bought themselves everyone's favorite ice cream. Having reached their destination, the Curies took a picnic basket and went to a long-explored forest edge. "Brother, let's play," little Avellini asked, her eyes shining. "Okay," said Eric, looking lovingly at his sister. "What shall we play?" After thinking for a bit, the blonde replied, "Hide and seek. Don't count," Avellini said, pointing her finger at the red-haired man. "Don't go far," Eric's mother shouted. "Okay, Mom," the children answered in chorus. "How many should I count to?" "Until 20, the blonde answered, moving away from her brother. Leaning his forehead against the tree, Eric began to count. 19, 20. "It's not my fault if you didn't hide." After walking a couple of meters, the red-haired man heard the sound of a shot right from where his parents were now. "Hunters," Eric thought. Then Avellini ran out from behind a bush. With a worried expression, she ran up to her brother and said, "I'm scared. Maybe we should go back?" Another shot rang out. "Fine." Returning to camp, Eric and his sister saw the corpses of their parents. Avellini burst into tears and asked in a voice trembling with tears, They're alive, right? They just fell asleep? Eric pressed his ear to each parent's heart, but all he heard in response was silence. At that moment, even the birds stopped singing. They're dead? Eric said, feeling a lump in his throat. Avellini cried even harder. Everything will be fine, the red-haired man said, hugging his sister, realizing that hot tears were flowing from his eyes. Do you promise? Avellini asked, raising her head with hope in her voice. I promise. From that very moment, Eric swore revenge on his parents' killer. End flashback.
Hey, Eric.
The boss has assigned us a new mission. Let's go discuss the details. Okay, Avellini. Let's go, the red-haired man replied, getting up from his chair. A woman of about 40 stood in a classroom full of students. She was slender. She had brown eyes. Her once blonde hair was already turning gray. She wore black dress shoes, a light gray pencil skirt, a white blouse and square, rounded glasses with black frames. This is how a chemical reaction occurs. Uzumaki, what have you been doing all night? The teacher yelled at the sleeping Naruto. I slept, Uzumaki answered reluctantly. Although he had slept all night, he felt tired. Aha, you look. The teacher was about to answer, but the Jinchuriki vanished in a puff of smoke. The class erupted in wild panic. In the main square of Paris, a blonde guy in a fox costume fought a white-haired, blue-eyed girl in a bee costume, and a guy in a tiger costume who had red hair and bright green eyes. Destructive claws, the guy shouted, moving his hand from the upper right corner to the lower left corner. Strange blue streaks appeared from Lev's arm, approaching Naruto. The blonde managed to dodge the unexpected attack, but it still left a small, shallow scratch on his forearm. The boy's attack was immediately followed by the girl's. Using her bees, she attempted to immobilize Naruto. However, he deftly dodged them. Destructive claws, the guy shouted again. So the bees are a distraction, flashed through Naruto's head. The blonde moved right up to Lev in a split second and kicked him in the chest with enhanced chakra. The red-haired man flew back several meters. The blow broke several of the boy's ribs and also ruptured his lung, causing him to cough up blood. Casting him an indifferent glance, Naruto began to approach the girl, simultaneously forming a Rasengan in his hand. The blonde, no longer able to use the bee's power, began to back away, but this continued until she encountered an iron fence. Resigned to her fate, the blonde covered her face with her hands, but the next thing she felt was a dull ache in her neck, and then there was only blissful, calming, and much-desired darkness. The first thing the girl saw was a white ceiling. Listening to her sensations, the blonde realized she was lying on a bed as soft as down. Sitting up, she looked around. The room resembled a gloomy hospital ward. There was a fairly large window on the right side. All the walls were painted white. A redhead was visible on the bed next to her. Smiling, the girl got out of bed and walked over to the next bed. Her brother, Eric, slept on it. There was a needle inserted into his arm, which, if you look above, led to N4. Hearing a strange rustling sound behind her, Avellini turned around. A boy about 16 sat on the windowsill. He had blonde hair that stuck out in all directions and bottomless blue eyes. But his most distinguishing feature was the stripes on both cheeks. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt, orange sweatpants, and a backpack. Who are you? Avellini asked, a little frightened and confused. I am Naruto Uzumaki. Seeing the girl's puzzled look, the blonde continued. I am the one you fought with in the square. The girl tried to feel the bee pin in her hair, but it wasn't there. Isn't this what you're looking for? Naruto asked, taking the talisman out of his pocket. Avellini looked at the Jinchuriki in surprise. I also have your brother's talisman, Uzumaki said, showing the pendant. Before you start asking questions, I want to tell you that your parents were killed by the leader of the Raven's Eye. I don't believe it. This is nonsense. Avellini replied indignantly. I knew you'd say that, so I brought this with me, Naruto said, handing the girl the papers he'd previously taken out of his backpack. What is this? This is a dossier on your parents. It describes where, when, and how they were killed. Avellini ran her eyes over the text, and everything the guy said turned out to be true. Looking up at the window, Avellini no longer saw the mysterious Naruto Uzumaki. Avellini walked through the empty corridors after reporting on the failed mission. She looked depressed, but after a few comforting words from her comrades, the girl finally pulled herself together. In the hospital room, she decided not to tell Eric about their parents' real killer, as he was too hot-tempered and would therefore act rashly. Avellini had already devised a plan in her little head. She would pretend not to know who killed her parents and then, at the perfect moment, stab them in the back. It was a simple plan, but it worked, so Avellini had no choice but to wait. Thanks to his clones, Naruto was able to spend more time studying his newly acquired knowledge. However, when one of his clones became upset right in class, he had to wiggle out of it by telling the teacher something about a new disappearing act. It was clear from the teacher's eyes that he wasn't entirely convinced by this story, but finding nothing to complain about, he was forced to leave Naruto alone. The day gave way to night, and the moonlit night also smoothly flowed into another sunny day. Minute by minute, hour by hour, the week passed. The criminal organization, Eye of the Raven, had already planned an attack on Paris, and no one could resist it. Not even the unknown person nicknamed Fox, or so they thought. That night, murder after murder took place. The bodies of the victims fell more and more often onto the rain-soaked asphalt. But it had to stop someday. The Fox, as the locals nicknamed him, appeared on the street in a flash of lightning, and literally a moment later, Ladybug and Cat Noir appeared behind him. The entire Raven's Eye organization was already waiting for them on this street in Paris. Their leader, it seemed, stood one step ahead of everyone else. He was dressed in a dragon costume, had blonde hair, and bright blue eyes that resembled a calm sea. "You can't defeat us, we have the numerical advantage, to say the least. Naruto, are you sure you don't want to defect to our side?" The leader asked. Uzumaki smiled and looked his opponent straight in the eyes and said, "Even if I am on the verge of death, I will not go over to the enemy's side. Then today you will find yourself on that very edge." The leader wanted to say, but he was not destined to speak anymore. Young Avellini found herself behind her leader with incredible speed. She thrust the blade with a precise blow straight into the brown-haired man's heart. A moment passed, and now the dead body of her main enemy was lying on the ice-cold ground. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Eric asked. "I had to do it because he is the one who killed our parents," Avellini said. "I wanted to avenge them," the girl said, already starting to scream. "But how? This can't be," Curie whispered. "I don't believe you," one shouted. "Bank attendant," the second one supported. "I'll kill you right now," the guy in the snake costume said with undisguised hatred, swinging his sharp blade at Avellini. But then Naruto appeared in front of her, using his chakra hand to break the bladed weapon in a split second, throwing the serpent back 2 meters. "When will you understand that revenge is not the answer?" Uzumaki asked rhetorically. "But what else could I do?" Avellini asked with tears in her eyes. "An acquaintance of mine killed my teacher, then attacked the village where I was born and killed half the inhabitants. But then I was finally able to forgive him, and he, in turn, resurrected those he had killed at the cost of his own life. But why? Hatred only breeds hatred. If I killed him, his loved ones would hate me and want to kill me. Having killed me, my loved ones would want to avenge me. And then this cycle of hatred would be impossible to break. Perhaps your leader had reasons to kill your parents." "You have no idea how right you are, Naruto," said a vaguely familiar voice. A male silhouette appeared from the shadows of the night. The man, stepping into the light of the lantern, grinned. "Madara equals Chapter 11. Eyes Madara? But how?" Uzumaki asked in surprise. "It's very simple, kid," the Uchiha replied, smiling predatorily. "By giving my body to Kaguya, I received a new life, new opportunities, and most importantly, new power." With each word, Madara's eyes grew more and more maddened. It seemed as if nothing could save him from this madness. But after a few seconds, Madara finally managed to regain his former calm. "Do you even realize how many people died in this war?" Naruto asked, gradually raising his voice to a shout. "I understand that perfectly well, but those sacrifices were worth it," Madara replied with a grin. You understand that now the survivors are happy. After all, they found themselves in the world of their dreams. Do you understand that this world is just a fake, an illusion? And I think it's wrong to build happiness on the corpses of thousands of innocent people who also deserve this happiness. You're an interesting guy. Shall we fight? The Uchiha asked, activating his Sharingan, though the question sounded more like a statement. Without bothering to answer the question, Naruto went on the attack. The opponents clashed in taijutsu. Strike, strike, sweep, block. That's how their silent battle went. In hand-to-hand combat, they were practically equal. But Madara had more combat experience, so he still dominated. Naruto, once again falling, quickly gets up and desperately throws his fists at Madara. The latter blocks and raises his hand to strike, but freezes just a centimeter from Naruto. The Uchiha's eyes widened in horror. Madara saw a sea of corpses, and everything would have been fine. But amidst this carnage, he saw his resurrected self, continuing to mercilessly kill shinobi. But why did he feel pain at that moment? This pain was comparable to the loss of his father and all his brothers, especially Izuna, who was killed by Tobirama, the brother of his greatest rival, Hashirama. But whose feelings are these? This guy's? His theory was confirmed when Naruto launched his next attack. With each blow from the Jinchuriki, Madara received new feelings and memories, and he no longer dodged much. He was intrigued. Uchiha began to involuntarily respect Naruto. After all, not everyone can wholeheartedly love a place where everyone once hated them. At some point, Madara stopped Naruto's fist with his palm, and looking him straight in the eyes, threw him into his genjutsu. "I must admit, I'm impressed, kid," Madara said, standing in the usual empty white space. "Shocked by what?" Naruto asked, surprised. Madara smiled sadly and said, "Let's continue." After Madara's genjutsu, Naruto's vision became blurred, but after a short period of time, it returned to normal. "Katon, great fireball!" the Uchiha shouted, completing all the seals. Thanks to his reaction, Naruto managed to jump back, but the fire still managed to hit Uzumaki's leg. The burn was minor, and thanks to Kurama, it healed quickly. Naruto threw a smoke bomb, completely forgetting that it was no obstacle for the Sharingan, and created 2 shadow clones. As the smoke began to clear, a Rasen Shuriken was already flying towards Madara. The Uchiha seemed completely calm, standing in the same relaxed posture as before. And then this terrifying technique reached Madara's body. He didn't scream, not a muscle twitched on his face. Throughout his life, the Uchiha had become accustomed to pain. It looked after him as often as a loving mother would her beloved son. It was safe to say that pain had replaced everything else for him. Madara's nearly dead body fell onto the cold asphalt. Naruto approached the enemy. Suddenly, the Uchiha's closed eyes opened. Blood began to flow from his eyes, and the pattern of the Sharingan seemed to change slightly. "Eyes?" Madara said in a hoarse voice, coughing up blood, which was not surprising, because his body had turned into a bloody mess. "Take my eyes. I beg you." These were Madara's last words, his last wish, and the last thoughts of the great shinobi were, "He looks so much like Izuna." Commentary on Chapter 11. Sorry it's been a while since I've posted a chapter. It's just hard to write while studying. Chapter 12. I am where my home is. Not daring to refuse, Naruto sat in the lotus position and carefully removed Madara's eye, then his own. It was painful, unbearably painful, but Naruto endured, feeling hot, bloody tears streaming down his cheek from the empty socket. Pulling himself together, Uzumaki opened the socket and inserted Madara's eye. After doing the same operation with the other eye, Naruto began to pour chakra into his new eyes. A minute passed, then 2, and then Uzumaki opened his eyes. The combined cells of Indra and Ashura's reincarnations allowed Naruto to obtain the Rinnegan. Those watching were shocked, to put it mildly. Some even fainted. The doctors merely sighed and shook their heads as they watched the hapless surgeon operate. Many were frightened by the dried tear stains on his cheeks and the strange eyes, which made everyone present sense danger with a sixth sense. Naruto stood up and walked towards the Raven's Eye with a slow but confident gait. Coming closer, Naruto asked, "I hope you will work for the good of Paris?" "Yes," the organization answered confidently. "Then I'm at peace," Naruto said with relief. "But know that I'm keeping an eye on you," Uzumaki continued, smiling slightly. "I think it's time to say goodbye," the Jinchuriki said, starting to make hand seals. And on the last seal, Naruto says, "Technology of global movement." The blonde's body began to slowly fade away, and with one last smile at these people, Naruto vanished without a trace. Naruto appeared in a dimension unknown to him. The sounds of battle could be heard nearby, and it was clearly a life and death battle. Entering Bijou mode, Uzumaki found himself on the battlefield in a split second. He saw Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and an unknown, nearly dead man. The brunette was quite battered. His pale skin was covered in numerous small scratches, but there were also some fairly deep wounds. Dried blood was visible in his dark hair, indicating numerous falls. Noticing Uzumaki, the Uchiha looked at him in surprise and paid the price, taking another blow from Teo. Kakashi and Sakura looked equally surprised. "There's no time to explain," Naruto said in a serious tone. "We'll deal with them quickly, and I'll explain everything to you." Sasuke only nodded in response. Uzumaki and Uchiha split up, planning to fight one-on-one. The brunette took on Kaguya, and the blonde took on Teo. "Rose thorns," Naruto's opponent cried out, holding her hand out in front of her. A barrage of sharp spikes rushed towards Uzumaki. There were so many of them that it was simply impossible to dodge them. Naruto tried to somehow resist and shouted, "Absorption!" Uzumaki's Rinnegan glowed with a faint purple light. The technique hadn't absorbed all the spikes, or rather, it had only absorbed the closest ones. Therefore, taking a kunai out of his pouch, Naruto began to try to deflect all the spikes flying at him. He managed to avoid almost all the injuries, but the spikes that didn't deflected felt like bullets piercing deep under his skin. But thanks to Kurama, these wounds were nothing to Naruto. Having created several shadow clones, Uzumaki began to close the distance in order to fight Teo in close combat, and the clones began to create Raisin Shuriken. Punch, punch, block, punch. Thus their silent struggle continued. And now the improved Rasengan is flying towards Teo. It's very close, and the unexpected happens. Chapter 13. This is not the end. The technique right in front of Teo disappeared and appeared behind Naruto. Easily dodging his own technique, Uzumaki thought, so she turns the enemy's techniques against him. But will she be able to repel techniques that are invisible to her? Naruto activated his Rinnegan and put his hands forward, saying, "Shinra Tensei," and Teo flew back a few meters. But quickly getting up, she stretched out her hand forward and shouted, "Devil's Roses, Forest of Roses." The blonde's eyes began to glow blindingly bright, like the sun in the Suna Desert. A multitude of rather thin, thorny vines rushed towards Naruto, which intertwined into one single thick vine. He jumped up and the technique rushed after him. Right, left, sideways, the roses followed Uzumaki on his heels. Without losing his composure, the Jinchuriki created a Rasengan and struck the unknown technique with it. The thorny vines withstood the blow and, what's more, showed virtually no damage. Without despair, Naruto created a tailed beast Rasen Shuriken and, jumping back a few meters, threw it at the annoying technique. And so the technicians clashed. The Raisin Shuriken began to slowly tear apart the sturdy vines. Having destroyed the last, lonely vine, one of the most powerful techniques in Naruto's arsenal flew into a nearby stone and dissolved. Uzumaki had already performed several seals standing behind Teo. Tiger, snake, dragon, snake, sealing. Naruto's eyes began to study the faint purple glow. Teo just smirked and said quietly, almost in a whisper, "This is not the end yet." Lost in thought over her words, Uzumaki failed to notice several small seeds falling from the wide sleeve of Teo's kimono, and the Sun Woman herself disappeared, appearing presumably in the sun. Naruto went in the direction where he felt Sasuke's chakra, and a minute later he saw a smiling brunette who, apparently, had defeated his opponent. You know, Naruto? The Uchiha said, seeing the interest in the blonde's eyes as he continued. It was only when I found out you died that I realized how much I valued our friendship, and what a naive idiot I was leaving Konoha. It was clear that Sasuke found it hardest to admit his mistake. I'm glad that my death is useful, Naruto replied with a smile. Can you finally tell me how you survived? Sakura asked. I personally checked your condition. Let me tell you about it later. But Naruto's right, Sakura. We need to return to our dimension first, said Kakashi. Everyone, touch me, Sasuke said in a commanding tone. I'll carry you. I see you have some chakra left. Let me handle it, Naruto said. But you don't have a Rinnegan. In response, Uzumaki activated his dojutsu. Everyone obeyed without question, perhaps due to shock. The 4 Hokage and the Sage of the 6 Paths awaited the shinobi's return. They had no choice but to wait. The minutes of waiting seemed like an eternity to the living dead. For Minato, these minutes were brightened by rather tense conversations with Tobirama and almost friendly ones with Hashirama, with whom he had much in common. For example, both adored green tea with lemon balm and copious amounts of dango. Both also had a low alcohol tolerance. A few small cups of sake were enough for them to see dolphins swimming in the sky, being eaten by cuttlefish, or at least for the next dream of a sick psychopath to see a fox gnawing on bamboo, followed by an enraged panda screaming, "Give me back my bamboo, or I'll have to stop being a herbivore." And of course, both of them doted on their Uzumaki wives, who would sometimes beat them half to death for being late for dinner. Sometimes Minato noticed how the sage would cast extremely satisfied glances at the Hokage, while the second and third would again argue fiercely over something, exchanging not the most decent remarks. Their relatively peaceful conversation was interrupted by a funnel that appeared in the sky. Commentary on Chapter 13. This is not the end. This chapter took a very long time to write. The next one will come out faster. Chapter 14. Will you remember me? Naruto and the others appeared on the battlefield. The first thing they saw was the resurrected Hokage and the Sage of the 6 Paths, who were staring at them in shock, or more precisely, at the dead blonde. The second thing Uzumaki noticed was the corpses that covered almost every patch of ground. This was completely at odds with the joyful, albeit surprised, faces of the people awaiting them. The blonde's pupils dilated in silent horror at this picture. Hey Naruto, Naruto, are you okay? Uzumaki heard a distant voice. Raising his sky-blue eyes, the blonde saw his father, Minato Namikaze, calling him. Yes, everything is fine. I was just thinking, Uzumaki said, smiling his signature smile. Minato looked at him with some distrust, but having decided something to himself, he nodded. No, Naruto, don't even think about doing that. What are you talking about, Kurama? You yourself understand perfectly well what I mean. Are you reading my mind? You could say that. Well, since you know everything, then you need to leave, Naruto said sadly. No. I'm with you until the end, Kurama answered decisively. Dash, you are sure? Dash, absolutely. Then I'll act. Sorry to interrupt your conversation, but I have a favor to ask of you, Naruto said. Really? And what kind? Sasuke asked mockingly. I'd be glad if you remembered me, be it my appearance, my voice, or the missions we've done together, Naruto said, looking at Team 7. What do you mean? Sakura asked, confused. The blonde smiled and quietly said only one word, farewell. After this he took off and, putting his hands in front of him, shouted, Technique of Universal Resurrection. All the dead bodies began to rise, and only one small lifeless body fell to the cold ground. Seeing this, Sakura ran to Naruto and began trying to heal him. But the Uzumaki was not destined to survive this war. No one but him, but people were able to fulfill his final wish. And even many years later, everyone remembered the great hero Naruto Uzumaki.